Imagine meticulously highlighting a paper map for a road trip. You're just terrified of missing a turn.
Oh, yeah, like the old MapQuest days.
Exactly. And meanwhile, there is a smartphone with live traffic updating GPS sitting completely ignored right there in your pocket.
Just burning a hole in your pocket while you stress over the paper map.
Right. I mean, it sounds absurd. The paper map will, it'll eventually get you from point A to point B, but, well, the anxiety of missing a detour, the inability to adapt to a sudden roadblock.
Not to mention just the sheer weight of carrying all that cognitive load yourself.
Yes. It's completely unnecessary. But what if you were doing the exact same thing right now with your career in the AI era?
Wow. Yeah, that's a very uncomfortable question to ask.
It really is.
But it's a necessary one, I think, because we are all highly susceptible to holding on to tools that have historically kept us safe, even when those tools are, frankly, profoundly obsolete.
Okay, let's unpack this, because usually when we talk about artificial intelligence, we are relentlessly focused on the mechanics.
Right, the tactical stuff.
Exactly. It's always the how-to, like which specific models you absolutely must use this week, or how to engineer the flawless prompt.
Or how the newest update is going to automate your entire coding environment by Tuesday.
Yeah, the endless tech bro AI hype cycle.
Yeah.
But today, we are taking a completely different angle for this deep dive. We are stepping entirely away from the tactical mechanics and looking at the underlying philosophy.
The psychological architecture of living in this era.
Yes, the mindset required to actually breathe in a fundamentally changed world. And we're drawing our insights today from a deeply reflective essay titled Finding My Flow in the Age of AI.
Written by Aaron Rose.
Right, Aaron Rose, who is a software engineer and technology writer. Our mission today is to really explore this profound internal shift he maps out, moving away from clinging to those outdated, heavy workflows and stepping into an intentional, value-driven flow.
And I have to say, seeing a software engineer step back from the code to write something this introspective,
It's so refreshing, isn't it?
incredibly refreshing, because his background is what makes his perspective so vital here. I mean, here is someone whose entire professional existence is predicated on logic, syntax, and systems.
Right.
Yet, he isn't writing about how to optimize a database. He is writing about the profound emotional friction he observes in the human beings operating around him.
Yeah, he starts by detailing these quiet observations of the external world. He's noticing that people, physical spaces, and like entire corporate systems are still fiercely operating from what he calls a pre-AI worldview.
Which is such a fascinating term.
I see that everywhere, honestly.
Yeah.
But what does a pre-AI worldview actually look like in practice? Like, how do we spot that map highlighter behavior out in the wild?
Well, according to Rose, it mostly manifests in the heaviness of our processes.
Heaviness.
Yeah, you can literally feel it in how organizations still plan out projects. Think about the traditional corporate roadmap.
Oh boy, endless sync meetings.
Exactly. Rigid waterfall project management, manual status updates, and workflows built on the assumption that generating a first draft or, processing a batch of data will take weeks.
Right, because historically it did take weeks.
Exactly. Those systems made absolute sense 10 years ago. They were required because execution was expensive, it was time-consuming. But today, maintaining those exact same structures feels incredibly heavy.
Heavy really is the perfect word for it. It's the friction of forcing information through this narrow manual pipeline when a massive superhighway exists right next to it.
A superhighway that's basically empty and ready for you.
Exactly. But here's what I don't fully understand. If you know the superhighway is there, if you know that a data analysis task that used to take you 3 days can now be done by an LLM writing a Python script in 12 seconds, why do we stubbornly cling to the heavy process?
Because it's familiar.
But why is it so human to choose the friction over the ease?
Because that friction used to be the exact metric of our competence. Think about it. Those heavy processes weren't just annoying hurdles. They were our survival mechanisms. They were literally the methods by which we proved our reliability and secured our value in the marketplace.
That makes a lot of sense.
When you've spent a decade mastering the intricate art of the printed map, learning how to read the topography, how to anticipate the bad routes, how to perfectly execute all that manual work, that mastery becomes your professional identity.
You're proud of it.
Right. It feels safe. You are the map person.
So letting go of that heavy process feels like letting go of your own hard-earned expertise.
Actually, it's worse than that. It feels like a loss of identity.
Wow.
Yeah, if your entire self-worth was tied up in being the person who could flawlessly grind through a 12-hour spreadsheet session, and now the spreadsheet essentially does itself well, who are you?
What is your value?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What do you bring to the table? And Rose is incredibly astute here because he explicitly notes that as he watches people struggle with this, he feels zero judgment.
Which is so important.
It is. He writes that he isn't above them, and he isn't trying to offer unsolicited advice or act like a guru. He is simply noticing the tension.
I think if you're listening to this right now and feeling completely overwhelmed by the changing landscape of your own job, it's crucial to adopt that non-judgmental stance toward yourself.
Be kind to yourself.
Right. It's a biological imperative to hold on to the heavy tools that built your past successes. Our brains chemically reward us for completing familiar tasks.
Absolutely. Recognizing that psychological reality is the first step. But Rose doesn't just leave it at observing others. The essay pivots internally.
He turns the lens on himself.
He does. Seeing this profound struggle in the corporate and creative worlds forces him to look in the mirror and ask, am I carrying any of that old worldview forward without realizing it?
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because in asking that question, he hits on the core thesis of the entire essay. He realizes that AI didn't just add a shiny new tool to our existing toolbox.
No, it didn't.
It fundamentally changed the terrain we are standing on.
The distinction between a new tool and a new terrain is, I think, the defining concept of this era.
Break that down for me.
Think about it this way. When humanity upgraded from a manual handsaw to a power saw, the terrain didn't change. You were still building a house out of wood.
Right. The physics of the job remained identical.
Exactly. You just did it slightly faster. Rose argues that AI is not a power saw. AI changed the actual physics of reality.
That is a massive statement.
But it's true. It changed the baseline pace of what is possible, and consequently, it completely eliminated the need for entire categories of human effort.
So the environment itself has mutated.
Yes.
And if that's true, then bringing our old habits into this new environment isn't just inefficient, it's actively self-destructive.
It guarantees burnout. You will exhaust yourself. To survive a terrain shift, you have to ruthlessly question your old assumptions. You have to totally redefine what effort, value, and productivity actually mean in a world where execution is suddenly cheap.
Let me push back on that, though, or at least let me voice the existential dread that I think a lot of people feel when we talk about redefining value.
Go for it.
If the terrain has changed so drastically that our old definitions of effort and productivity are suddenly obsolete, doesn't that fundamentally threaten our sense of self-worth?
It does. It absolutely does.
Right, because if hard work no longer looks like sweating over the mechanics of a project, how do we know we're actually providing value? How do we justify our paychecks or our artistic merit to ourselves?
That is the absolute friction point of this paradigm shift, and it requires a completely new economic and psychological framework.
How so?
Well, in the pre-AI world, value was intrinsically linked to execution, the sweat equity, the sheer time it took to physically write the code, draft the marketing copy, or, clean the data set.
For peddling.
The peddling. But AI has commoditized execution. When execution is free, the only scarce resource left, the only thing that actually holds value is taste.
Taste. Say more about that. I love that word in this context.
Taste is curation. It is human intention. It's the ability to look at a blank canvas and know which problem is actually worth solving in the first place.
Oh, that's good.
It's the ability to review the instantaneous output of an AI and say, no, this lacks empathy, or yes, this perfectly aligns with our strategic vision.
So the editorial eye.
Precisely. If you continue to measure your worth by the pre-AI metric of manual effort, you will exhaust yourself fighting the new terrain. Value is no longer the sweat of the mechanical work. Value is the direction you point the machine.
Okay, I want to use an analogy here to make sure I'm wrapping my head around this terrain shift.
Let's hear it.
It sounds like pre-AI work was like riding a bicycle. The physics were simple. Your physical pedaling, your raw effort, directly equaled your speed. If you want to go faster, you pedaled harder.
Right, direct correlation.
But working in the AI era is like sailing. If you get on a sailboat and just start pedaling your legs, you're going to look ridiculous.
And you'll completely exhaust yourself.
Yes. And you won't move an inch because the terrain has changed. You have to stop pedaling and learn to catch the wind.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. I love that. The wind is the immense free leverage of artificial intelligence. It contains massive amounts of kinetic energy.
Just waiting to be used.
Exactly. But wind without a rudder is just chaos.
Right.
Your taste, your human intention, your editorial judgment, that is the rudder. You don't need to generate the power anymore, but you absolutely must steer the ship.
Which honestly sounds incredible, but also incredibly daunting.
It's terrifying for a lot of people.
Yeah. If the old definitions of effort, the pedaling, are gone, how do we actually learn to sail? How do we move forward without losing control? And I think this brings us to what Rose calls his personal experiment for navigating this massive shift.
Yeah, his approach is deeply rooted in a desire to move with the current rather than fighting against it.
Right.
He wants to let the natural, accelerating flow of this new era help him, but he makes a vital distinction here.
What's the distinction?
He explicitly clarifies that he does not mean going with the flow in a passive, surrendered sort of way. It is not about throwing your hands up, abandoning your critical thinking, and letting the algorithm dictate your life.
Right. He calls it intentional positioning.
Yes.
And I love the idea of intentional flow, but honestly, I don't know what that actually looks like on a Tuesday morning when my inbox is flooded and I have 3 project deadlines looming.
It sounds a bit abstract.
Exactly. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? How does someone actually practice this distinction between just passively accepting AI and intentionally flowing with it?
That's the real challenge.
Like, how do you stay open to all these rapidly emerging capabilities without just blindly adopting every single new tech trend that hits your feed?
It requires a framework of brutal, continuous self-auditing.
Self-auditing.
Yeah. Practically, this means pausing at the start of your week and identifying the tasks that cause you the most friction. You look at your to-do list and you ask yourself a very specific question. Am I doing this manually because it genuinely requires my unique human taste and emotional intelligence? Or am I doing this manually simply because I've done it this way for 5 years?
Oh, that's a tough question to answer, honestly.
It really is.
And if it's the latter, if you're just doing it out of habit.
You offload it to the machine, you drop the heavy process.
Yeah.
That is the flexibility he talks about. Rose boils this down to a guiding mantra. Flexibility, yes, but anchored in integrity. Adaptation, yes, but guided by my values.
Flexibility anchored in integrity. So what does that tension look like in practice?
It's a paradox you have to constantly balance. On one hand, you must be radically flexible. You have to be willing to look at a skill you spent years honing and say, this is no longer the most effective way to achieve my goal, and just let it go.
You catch the wind.
You catch the wind. But on the other hand, while you are moving at this terrifying new speed, you must rigidly hold on to who you are and what you care about. That is your integrity. That is your rudder.
Because if you have the flexibility without the integrity, you just become a dead leaf floating wherever the algorithmic water takes you.
Exactly.
You blindly adopt every trend, you lose your unique voice, and you just become a conduit for generic AI-generated slop without any personal stamp.
Precisely. You become a passive consumer of the current rather than a navigator of it.
But conversely.
Right. Conversely, if you hold on to your integrity but refuse to be flexible, you become a rock stuck at the bottom of the river.
Just getting battered by the water.
You just sit there clutching your paper MapQuest directions, getting battered by the current of progress until you wear away. The intentional flow Rose is aiming for is an active, highly engaged state of being.
You're participating in it.
Fully. You use the immense leverage of the technology to eliminate the friction, but you are the one choosing the destination based on your deeply held values.
And what I find so compelling about Rose's essay is the profound humility woven through it.
Yes, the tone is amazing.
He isn't selling a masterclass. He states very clearly, I don't have a blueprint. I'm not offering a model. I'm not telling anyone how to navigate this moment.
He is simply sharing the real-time results of his own internal experiment. He wants to move forward in a way that feels aligned and sustainable, rather than forced and exhausting.
Which is such a relief to read.
And that humility is really the secret weapon for anyone trying to survive this era. You have to be humble enough to admit that the old rules don't apply, and curious enough to figure out the new ones.
I think for anyone listening, that posture is incredibly freeing. You don't need to have a perfect, bulletproof master plan for how AI is going to affect your industry in 5 years.
Nobody has that plan. Literally nobody.
Right. You just need to adopt the right posture today. Choosing alignment over forced action. letting the leverage of the technology carry the heavy lifting, but doing it consciously, with both hands firmly on the wheel of your core values.
It completely relieves the pressure of needing to be an oracle. You don't have to predict the future, you just have to be observant.
Notice the friction.
Notice the friction in your daily life. Shed the heavy, pre-AI habits that no longer serve you, and become fiercely protective of your personal taste and integrity.
So let's take a step back and sort of synthesize the journey we've just been on today.
Sure.
We started by looking outward, identifying that pre-AI worldview. You know, those heavy manual processes that people cling to, because the processes used to be the exact definition of competence and safety.
And from there, we internalize that observation. We explore the reality of the terrain shift,
Right.
recognizing that AI isn't just a faster bicycle, it's a completely new mode of transportation. It shifts the entire economic value of our work from raw manual execution to elevated human taste and curation.
And finally, we broke down how to actually move through this new terrain without burning out, which is by embracing a posture of intentional flow.
Running that weekly audit on your
Yes, being radically flexible with your methods, letting go of the busy work, but staying absolutely anchored in your core values and your editorial judgment.
The immediate application here, for you listening, is to sit down tomorrow morning and interrogate your own friction.
Ask the hard questions.
Where are you carrying the unnecessary weight of a pre-AI worldview? What specific tasks are you doing the hard way simply because it's the way you learned to do them a decade ago?
Where are you pedaling the sailboat?
Exactly.
It's such a vital question. But before we wrap up, there is one final, somewhat provocative thought that this whole discussion points toward. Something to really mull over long after this deep dive ends.
What's that?
Well, we've talked extensively about how AI is stripping away the old friction, right? Eliminating the heavy busy work and destroying the traditional markers of hard work.
Yeah, we covered that.
But if you really think about it, that manual busy work often served a secondary hidden purpose for a lot of us.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
It gave us a place to hide.
A place to hide from the vulnerability of actually making a choice.
Exactly. When you spend 40 hours a week buried in the mechanics of a spreadsheet or drafting boilerplate code, you don't have to face the terrifying blank canvas of true creative direction. You have the ultimate shield.
Right. I'm too busy doing the work. But in this new terrain, when the machine handles all the mechanics instantaneously, that shield evaporates.
You're totally exposed.
Yes. Without the busy work, it might actually become much harder to hide who we really are, what we actually care about, and whether our taste is actually any good.
Because if execution is free, all that is left is your intention, your unique perspective, and your integrity.
And stepping into the light of that kind of exposure might be the most challenging and maybe the most thrilling part of this entire technological era.
It is a totally new frontier.
It really is. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into finding your flow. Take care, and we'll catch you on the next one.